Welcome, and here I am out in the snow because of my green screen. My name is John Boyle. I'm with the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, and today's action team meetup is for Delaware County. Um, and I would like to welcome everyone who was able to join us. Um, and I want to introduce our speakers tonight. So we'll have Daniel Paschall from the East Coast Greenway Alliance and Lizzie Hessek from the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. And we'll be presenting on the Route 291 corridor and the city of Chester. So this should be a very interesting meeting. And of course, this is also the core of the East Coast Greenway. So my assistants tonight are Patrick Monahan and Laura Song, and they'll be working in the background, making sure this goes as smoothly as possible, even as I flub up all the time. So let's dive in. Next slide, Patrick. So here's the vision of the circuit trails. It's an 800-mile network of trails that will connect across 9 counties. And right now, 340 of these 800 miles already exist. The trails connect through and between Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, Philadelphia, Burlington, Camden, Gloucester, and Mercer counties in our Delaware Valley region. And thousands of people use the trails every day, biking, running, walking, playing, and maybe if we get enough snow, some cross-country skiing. And the use of the circuit trails in the region since the pandemic is starting has increased immensely. The trails in the circuit have experienced increases as high as 120% from in 2020 versus 2019. And it really has shown us how important it is to create more trails in our region. Next slide. But how do we get to 800 miles of circuit trails? We're constantly advocating to our elected officials in the region, working with the state, our transportation and conservation agencies to get these trails built. So DCNR, PennDOT, and our county. All that behind the scenes work to move from an idea to actually being able to get out on the trail isn't what most people think of as the fun stuff. It can take a long time, as some of you know. Some of the projects in our plan have been worked on for years, even decades. So to get people excited and to set targets that people can get behind, the coalition assessed that we could achieve 500 miles of trails by 2025. And it's totally doable. Right now we have 340 miles, and so we need 160. And there are enough projects in the region that are either what we call in progress, they're in design, or they are actually being constructed as we speak. And we have others that are in the pipeline. And these are trails that we could get built by 2025. And it's really these pipeline projects that we really want to concentrate on, because the trails that are already in progress are barring some, some kind of disaster. They're going to be built by 2025. But it's the ones that we call in the pipeline that really need the help to get the political motivation to make sure these things happen. And of course, politics is everything. We talk about money. The money can be had, but you have to have the political will to actually allocate that money and go through the process. But we need help from people who love trails. And really, that's where we got our political will, right? When our elected officials hear from the people that they represent and who need places to walk and bike and be active outside. Just want to point out this map here. It looks a little bit different from what we saw in the outlines of the vision, because this one details how we're going to get it done. So what we have here so if you look in the background, you see the blue shaded municipalities. They're the ones that have actually passed resolutions to build the circuit trails. Also, all 9 counties have passed resolutions to build 500 miles of trails by 2025. And on the trails themselves, The ones that are colored black are existing. The red ones are in progress, and the ones that we're concerned about is the blue, which are in the pipeline. Next slide. So here's the math. We think that to get to, as we said, 500 miles, we have to build 160, and we think that we can build 100 in the state of Pennsylvania amongst the 5 counties. And we got 5 years and 4 years and change, but we can do this. But we will have 500. Well, sorry. So 100 miles. That's 100 miles in Pennsylvania. Divide by 5 counties. That's 20 miles in each county. It can be totally done. Either way, we're going to need your support to do it. Your support for the region's trails and key priority projects in our county. So next slide. So now I am going to turn it over to Daniel, and he is going to talk about the Route 291 corridor and other improvements to the East Coast Greenway in Delaware County. So take it away, Daniel.
Try to speak up. I know sometimes my microphone fades in and out, so let me know in the chat if I get a little quiet. I'm going to put the story map link in the chat so folks can follow along. And if you are listening along, please mute in case there's any background noises, just so everybody can hear. All right, and I will share my screen. So I'm Daniel Paschall with the East Coast Greenway Alliance. I'm the Mid-Atlantic Corridor Coordinator, and I am based in Philadelphia. So sharing now, let me know. John, can you see? Yep, all right. Cool, so I'm based in Philadelphia, and I will get into the Delaware County Action Team, which is, as John described, everybody here, focusing on one trail, although it's connected to others, and we definitely want all the trails in Delco to get built. We really want to focus our energy on the East Coast Greenway for a lot of reasons, but connectivity and economic redevelopment, safety and access are some of the major themes in this. And I'll get some help from partners who are on the call to help talk about some of the projects that are already happening right now, as well as some of the work that's happened leading up to this. So as John noted, this is part of the East Coast Greenway, a 3,000 mile long traffic separated biking walking route from Maine to Florida that is in development. So it's not all done yet, but it's also not zero. It's about a third complete. And actually in the Delaware Valley region, it's nearing around half complete. So there's a lot of trails that you might recognize. The DNR, the DNL, Schuylkill River Trail, the Cobbs Creek Trail, Hines Refuge Trail, the Markel Trail in Delaware. We hit not necessarily the entirety of all these trails, but we connect these trails up and down the Delaware Valley. So from, up in the Princeton area through Trenton into Philly, Northeast Philly, you can see the yellow highlighted trail is the East Coast Greenway through the Circuit Trails network. And that is leading down the Schuylkill River Trail that hits a portion of it, crosses over to the Cobbs Creek, joins the Darby Creek and the Hines Refuge area. And really that's where we'll be picking up in Delaware County, which is a nearly 12-mile segment. So it's a very lengthy segment, but it does have some pieces that are already done. So again, we want to accelerate the network's completion, and we want this to be really a spine trail or a trunk trail, you might call it, with branching trails that come out. And you can see in that story map, if you go here, this is a good spot to kind of look around at some of those other trails coming in, Darby Creek Trail, Chester Creek Trail. These are some really major ones, also picking up momentum. And then you can see the Delco ECG along the Delaware River, connecting Hines Refuge, the airport area, all the way to the Pennsylvania-Delaware border. And also the colors in the dotted lines shown here in the legend, it's in various stages. So I'll get into kind of what the major gaps are that we're focusing on, and how we can really think about not just building a trail, but really improving the quality of life for the communities here and for visitors coming in. This is both highly residential, but it's also very industrial. But it also has a casino and a stadium. It's a really interesting corridor with a lot to offer. So quick background, the Delaware County Planning Department did a great report in 2018 called the East Coast Greenway Implementation Phase 1. And they looked at an alignment, and they really ironed out where this could go, and they worked with all of these municipalities along the corridor, got support letters from each of those. They also worked with a number of the businesses along the corridor to get their support. The Riverfront Alliance of Delaware County, and I believe Lisa Gaffney is on the call, um, also got their support. They've been a great champion of the trail. Again, as a really a way to think about economic redevelopment, creating a place that people want to linger, people want to stay, whether you're walking to lunch along the trail, if you work along the corridor, or maybe you're commuting, you take the train and then you walk along the trail to your job, or you're visiting for a game at the stadium for the Philadelphia Union, and then you want to stay afterwards for lunch or dinner. It's really, supposed to fulfill the needs of anyone who might be living or visiting in the corridor. And so the major segments you can see in Marcus Hook and in Trainer, these are actually bike lanes. So those aren't technically East Coast Greenway standards in which that's traffic separated, but it is traffic calmed heavily. And then connecting to the riverfront, there's a piece that's a gap. We'll talk about that. The Riverfront Trail is really beautiful. But then the other major gap that we're looking at goes all the way through the rest of Chester, into Eddystone, through a small portion of Ridley Township, and then connects to a trail along 291 in Tinicum Township, uh, with another goal to complete the rest of the trail to get into Hines, both connecting at the 420 entrance and through what's called the wormhole. But that's for another day. So wanted to take you back through a little bit of the background. It's a really tricky corridor. It's kind of straightforward in the sense that a lot of it will follow Industrial Highway PA 291, which, like it sounds, is pretty rough to ride on. Um, However, there's space in a lot of portions of it for a trail right alongside. Parts of it have sidewalk, or a lot of it has sidewalk, but it's not always the best walking conditions. Crossings are really difficult getting across 291. You'll see some images of that. So that first gap that we're talking about from those bike lanes coming in from Marcus Hook to Trainer, that's really only just over a half mile long. It's not too long of a trail gap. And then it's important to note that while we're highlighting the Chester Riverfront Trail, we're going to have additional improvements along 291, and this is one of those projects that we're excited that's actually coming hot off of a new study or new plan that came out recently. I know Spencer Finch is on the line. Maybe he can talk to any questions about that. Um, but that reimagines 291 really as a gateway to the riverfront for the folks living in Chester, so that you have a really integrated network of walking and biking connections that are low stress, are comfortable, and really owned by people that are in this corridor every day. I wanted to note real quick in Marcus Hook that way back when, before I joined the East Coast Greenway Alliance, it used to be a 4-lane road through Marcus Hook Borough to the Pennsylvania-Delaware border, 35 mile per hour, the trucks along this route. And with a road diet, they actually implemented those bike lanes. And so while, again, it's not traffic separated, it's far better, to ride in this scenario than it is with 4 lanes. And so, trying to think about that as a way to reimagine a lot of these corridors is something that's going on across Pennsylvania, across the country, and it's something that I think could help us. Looking at Chester, you can see this is Highland Avenue. So this is that connection down to the riverfront. The cartway here is, really go out there and walk it, and then you'll really get a sense of what it feels like. But you can get an idea here. I know that I think Mike in the comments put up that he put in signage. You can see one of our trail markers along here. This is not what we want people to experience on the East Coast Greenway. So while wayfinding is great, capital improvements are even better. You can see someone walking, the sidewalks just barely connected here. One thing to note, you can see is just there's a lot of property that hasn't been developed in years. This was a project in the early 2000s to widen 291 actually as a way to improve economic development. The thinking was a little bit different back then of moving cars prioritized over moving people. And we really want to kind of get back to the human scale landscape that, is just across the street. You have Stoops, right up here that you would see in Philly or the rest of the county. So I wanted to highlight, there's a portion of Highland Avenue. I was walking out of a Philadelphia Union game and noticed some DIY traffic calming. This is not a good sign, for what the experience is for the people that live there, the people that are stuck in traffic, get back on the highway. No one's winning in the situation. And I think safety is incredibly important here. But so is just this feeling of a rush to get back to I-95. And, we want this to implement the improvements recommended in the development plan that were based on community feedback, as well as planner recommendations from past studies. So thinking about, again, that access, because you have a gorgeous riverfront. You have this amazing destination that people go to while they're walking to and from their cars in the parking lots from Union games, as well as other events. There's some really beautiful vistas of the Commodore Barry Bridge. It's a great stopping point along the East Coast Greenway if you're riding a longer trip. And then again, coming out of an event, you can experience that. You can be right by the water, which is kind of a rare feat in this corridor because so much of the land is industrial. You can fish. There's just like very few of these spots that preserve this access. So it's really critical that people learn about it and then are encouraged to go there by making it easier and more comfortable. Here's kind of an overview map of where that threads along the riverfront. And again, you can see the industrial land uses on either side, boxing it in. But here I wanted to give Lizzie Hessek of Pennsylvania Environmental Council a chance to talk about the two connections that we're really working to get down to the riverfront to then spur momentum for 291. Lizzie, are you?
Sure, thanks, Daniel.
Yeah.
So as Daniel mentioned, this riverfront trail has been in Chester for a while now, and it really is beautiful. The public access to the Delaware River that is accessible from this river walk is one of the only places in the entire county, and also one of the only places along the entire tidal Delaware that the river is accessible for boats and for people. You can get really down close to the river. So it's exciting. It's awesome that it's there. It passes the stadium. It passes some interesting historic architecture. It goes right underneath the bridge. It's cool, but it's pretty disconnected, very disconnected even. We learned in a study that we did that the two best ways to sort of get down to the river walk, besides Engle Street, which is right in the middle, is Highland Avenue down at the southern end. I'm going to be a little loosey-goosey with cardinal directions, and Norris Street, which is to the north on the other side of the bridge. Both of these streets are low traffic because they dead end into the river. They connect to 291 and the residential part of the city, and they are at the ends of the Riverwalk. So we looked at these streets, the East Coast Greenway, Pennsylvania Environmental Council, the Circuit Trails, as the ideal connection to bring the resource of the Riverwalk into the community and into the places where people are living and working, and making them more visible and safer, and at the same time, better stormwater management. So an environmental benefit as well. So since we came out with this feasibility, this concept plan for Highland and Norris Streets, we have been able to apply for funding to do final design engineering for Highland Avenue, which Daniel is zooming into right now. connecting up to 2nd Street, which is 291, and also Norris Street. So we've received partial funding for the Highland Avenue final design and engineering. And we applied for that funding last year. Norris Street, we applied for funding this year. We separated the two parts of this one project so that we could ask for more money to get a really high quality design for a complete street that has traffic calming, that has beautification, and that has environmental benefits as well. So we're planning on moving ahead with Highland Avenue's engineering this coming year, and hopefully Norris Streets will come through the year after. And then once we have the engineering for Highland Street, we'll be able to move straight to construction, and ditto for Norris Street. So it should be like a ping-ponging Highland Norris, with a completed link to the Chester River Walk in about 5 years, 4 or 5 years, depending on, catastrophes. But so that would hopefully link the East Coast Greenway up to the 291 corridor to 2nd Street, which, as Daniel showed us, would link back to the East Coast Greenway. It is the East Coast Greenway, but it would take us up to Philadelphia and down to Delaware, and would also create a nice loop with the traffic calming that is happening on 291. So we're really excited that we're moving forward with some planning that has been done in this area and getting traction from the funders as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie. And I was wondering actually if maybe before we move on, is Lisa Gaffney on the line? You could unmute and say hi.
Yes, I'm here, Daniel.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to give you a second to speak to the 2nd Street improvements that you all are pushing for, because I think it's helpful to have for the context here, if you don't mind.
Sure. We've been working with the Riverfront Alliance of Delaware County, and we've been working with Spencer from Langen and a consultant from Boston who had worked on our waterfront plan to really address the corridor between Highland Avenue and Norris on 291. As you showed the pictures, it is a 4-lane highway with a center turning lane, and it's basically disconnecting the residential neighborhoods to the north and making it difficult for them to access anything at the waterfront. So the design includes traffic calming. It includes additional signal at Ingle Street to allow more access, pedestrian bump outs, flashing lights, etc., which Spencer could probably describe way better than I could. But we're also looking at a trail as well along the south side of 291 that would connect to the Highland and Norris and down to the Riverwalk, and basically be almost 3 miles of trail that can be recreational and also transportation, but used by the residents and some of, as you mentioned, visitors and employees in the area. So we're excited about having a facelift of 291, and we think that the trail system is really an initial important project to jumpstart additional development at the waterfront, which is critical because now it's unfortunately a sea of parking lots on soccer days and kind of vacant the rest of the year. And so we have a plan for what would go on those spaces. But the trail is and the complete streets components that Lizzie talked about are very important initial steps that we think will help activate the waterfront.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I will move along the corridor. And yeah, let me know if you can't hear me. I got a note. So the second gap, as we heard from Lizzie and Lisa, the Highland and Norris and then 2nd Street between Highland and Norris are definitely moving forward and being worked on. And there's a lot of momentum. And I think that's super important because that is the most direct, of a connection you can have into the community of Chester, where it's very residential, and there's also a lot of potential for economic activity here. The rest of the segment, which is pretty lengthy stretch, this is actually a photo, a screenshot from an analysis that Michael Baker International did, looking at each of these segments, basically the right of way in that space that I referred to before. And so they do vary quite a bit. And so we're going to dig into that just a little bit because it has a lot of implications of how we might approach having a trail follow 291 all the way to Tinicum. So here again is that waterfront master plan. I definitely recommend going to the Riverfront Alliance of Delaware County. I think y'all have it hosted on your page. It's worth looking through. It's a very beautiful plan, and it has some images of what people might expect along the river, and some visions of not just long term but actually short term things too. So that's a really great document to dig through. And again, this is just on the other side of Norris, looking back towards the river. Wanted to again show that the cartway continues with those 4 lanes and the turning lane. Nice to find a bike here. But again, you have such a gulf between the community and there. And so this is actually one of those images that was in the waterfront master plan, reimagining medians, traffic calming, having a path along the south side. Sorry, it's a low resolution. I took a screen grab and then blew it up. That can all occur in the right of way with a little bit of land from outside of the corridor. But again, it really depends on where exactly you are. So that analysis that looked at the corridor broke up each segment into how many properties were right along the edge there of the trail. And so that's really important if we're looking at the need for land acquisition. To take land for the trail. There's some larger numbers than other segments. In segment 2, you can see 69 properties for just half an acre. And that, that alone is quite a stretch to try to make sure that you're getting a trail to go to that many properties and acquire that much land, especially when you can think about the right of way itself and reimagining that. So this is just one screenshot from that plan. You can see how the property lines, they're almost like jagged teeth up to 291. And again, with that expansion, things have changed. Some of these properties are actually being developed now. But again, to accelerate that development, accelerate the economic recovery of Chester, we want to make sure that this is an inviting place for people to set up a business and develop. And having that gulf of a highway is not the most inviting. And that's in the report, that's in other the waterfront master plan, it's in other plans too. I wanted to quickly just hit the other end of the trail. So, we were over here along Chester, down here, coming along to the final end of our corridor that we're concerned with today is the Tinicum side path. So it, doesn't look like a lot there. It does connect, a hotel, a couple other commercial businesses along 291. And it also has a nice view over the Darby Creek, really beautiful bridge down here at the mouth of the creek into the Delaware River. But this is also really important because it gives us a vision into, how does a side path become something that's actually a comfortable experience, actually something that's enjoyable. And I think they did a really great job. This is in Tinicum. So there is also branding for the Industrial Heritage Parkway that Delaware County worked really hard on. So, there's a lot of imagining that's gone on over the past many years. There's been a lot of work to get this trail in. And it's, it's worth considering like how this could change the experience, just having so much space, so much greenery, having lighting, having branding along this corridor that even though it's kind of a nasty road, you can still make something really nice of it that's far better than the sort of disconnected sidewalks we have now. Because I want to hit again on just, this is an economic improvement project. It's not just about biking and walking. This is a way to reimagine the quality of life in a really low cost way when you compare it to building a new stadium. So in thinking about, how people in the corridor are living, 40% of the households along 291 are in poverty, 30% commute without a car. So it's car oriented, but if you don't have a car, you don't, really benefit from that. And there's a number of bus stops along the corridor as well as access to those regional rail stations. So, if you're getting off at a bus here, this is, something that you would probably avoid if you have a better option. And if you have a better option, you'd be more likely to take transit even more. And safety and access is really important as we look at that corridor, thinking about improving that riverfront access. And that's something that a past study that DVRPC did in 2015 built off of previous studies and really tried to look at the traffic, the safety issues, and identified that wide cartway. And it's feels like a no-brainer when you look at it, but it's helpful to have those figures. It's helpful to have the traffic data. And what they found was the expansive cartway and the low traffic volumes contribute to the speeding. And in their assessment, they found that peak hour congestion and delay is not a major issue. So they looked at the level of service analysis. It is a trucking route. There is important connections for major businesses along there. But given the amount of space, the amount of real estate there just dedicated for moving vehicles, it's too much, and it encourages dangerous behavior. So, revisiting this option of, can we, instead of trying to get every little piece of property, and maybe we have to do some land acquisition, we think about how does that look if you acquire land. It just really adds it to the other side. And this is, I apologize, a really crude rendering. Apologize to all the planners out there who are better. But just to really just show you that you're not changing anything about the right of way. It's still an expansive highway that you can't even see the other side of. If you do add it in with a road diet, on the other hand, this is the second strategy, putting people, a little bit closer to the other side, giving you that space within the public right of way. It's a lot easier to do because you don't have to deal with some of the, along the corridor, the elevation changes. Sometimes it gets a little lower. In spots it goes by creeks, it gets a little wetter. You can avoid that. You can be in the cartway. And then, if the DVRPC study is really true, this is peak hour congestion is not a major issue. This should be something that, we can take on. So it's worth looking at, and we really want to push for that ability to reimagine, the whole corridor as a complete street. I think over and over the word that's used in the waterfront plan is gateway. So if you think about, changing a highway to a gateway, instead of PA 291 Industrial Highway, change it back into West 2nd Street, which is really what it is on the grid, and giving people back that local connector that they need. This kind of gets into the nitty gritty of, spatially how that might look. But again, it kind of shows you, so this first one is just adding it onto the side. This is the land acquisition. You still have the same travel lanes as you do above. But in this case, you can take away one of those. You can, keep parking on the side where you need it. You can consider, doing something else with this through lane if you don't need 2 lanes in each direction, or maybe you need it at certain intersections for wide turning for trucks. You could reimagine it with a bike lane if you went from 5 to 3. That's a common road diet configuration. You could even throw in a protected bike lane on the other side, since it is still pretty far away from the shared use path. So there's a lot of ways you could go with it. That's kind of the overall analysis. I have plenty more details you can look through on the story map. I don't want to dig too far into it. Definitely want to get to the discussion. So this is kind of summarizing, hey, if we had, this is the portion, or the 5 lanes of the whole roadway, 2 lanes in each direction, that turning lane lasts from basically Harrah's all the way to almost the border of Trainer, so throughout Chester. And then there's still 4 lanes into basically the grid, the street grid in Eddystone leads up to Seville Avenue. So that's kind of what we were looking at for, hey, this could be a potential road diet. And, if we can get some more analysis on if there's delays, if there's any like minor delays, okay, can we mitigate that with design? But it could be a really potentially amazing thing for safety and access while avoiding having to acquire so much property, and acknowledging that probably some property will have to be acquired further out. But these are larger properties like Boeing, Penn Terminals, some of these others that you only have to approach a few folks to get that. So I can go into the conclusion, or we can go back to discussion. Wanted to ask John kind of where we're at. Sorry, this one has a lot of depth, but I don't want to dig too far.
Thanks, Daniel. I think we will, let's go through the questions, but if we don't have any, you're certainly free to kind of go deeper, because I know you got some interesting stuff there. Just want to say that we'll take questions afterward. I just want to sort of like wrap up these slides here. If you join an action team via the Circuit Trails website, we'll be in touch. But if you haven't, we ask you to become a Circuit citizen. And Circuit citizens are kind of like the network of Circuit advocates that we are trying to create throughout the region. That connects you with issues that might be coming up and actions that we need to take. You'll be able to, so if you go to the website, circuittrails.org/get-involved, get-involved, you can become a Circuit citizen, and you can find out more about the gratitude campaign and the work that we're doing, more about the Delaware County action team. So Patrick, do you want to put the slides back up for a sec here? And you can jump to the last one. So we'll be having upcoming meetups in 2021. The first one will be Camden County on the 26th, Gloucester County on the 3rd, and Bucks County on the 8th, or the week of the 8th. As we mentioned before, circuittrails.org/get-involved and circuittrails.org/Delaware are your sources to learn more about the action teams and the Delaware County campaign. So we're going to take questions now. Do we have anything, Laura, that's in the chat?
I'm not sure if anybody had a question. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question directly.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I also wanted to add, while people are thinking about what their questions are, Daniel showed the Chester part of the 291 corridor and how it connects into the part that's built in Tinicum. That passes through Eddystone, where Boeing and some other industries are, as well as a great residential community. The municipality in Eddystone is already working on a comprehensive parks and trails plan that we are hoping to add a little bit more money from the Department of Environmental Protection and specifically the Coastal Zone Management Grant Fund to do sort of a specific look at the 291 corridor at the road diet. The borough is really interested in that work and in bringing the East Coast Greenway, like the high level East Coast Greenway, into the borough as well. So if anybody is in or around Eddystone and is interested in participating in the community engagement that will be happening around that plan, just keep your ears open for when those community meetings are going to start happening. There's nothing planned right now because of the pandemic, and it's in the beginning phases anyway of sort of figuring out how this money is going to be spent, but planning is going to happen. So if you are interested in participating, please just keep an eye out for that.
Thanks, Lizzie. Does anybody have any questions?
I do just have a comment. James Harper, we have an office right down there on 291, and just keep in mind, I noticed the pictures, there wasn't a lot of traffic there, but our office is right on 291 and Penn Street, and there's much more traffic down there than the picture shows. It's it's a major road, particularly when 95 is shut down and there's an accident. It picks up that much more. However, I believe that's the riverside where you're looking at possibly taking it down to the one lane away. But as we're talking and going through the studies, just keep in mind there is a lot of traffic on that 291 corridor, particularly in the city of Chester, and with the on-off ramp that for the Commodore Barry Bridge. it gets pretty busy down there.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'd love to know if, how often does 95 get backed up? Where is it? Are there specific segments of 291 that people are trying to jump to the exit ramp to get up to 95, or like where? Yeah.
Usually it depends on 95, but when I jump off 95, it's usually right around the Ridley exit, which may be exit 5 or 6.
6, I think, yeah.
And they'll come down through on 291 to Highland Avenue, or just depends on where the traffic is. They may go up towards the Marcus Hook area to get back on 95. But particularly during the summer, getting back and forth on the bridge, going to the shore traffic picks up, and just on a daily basis, the traffic does pick up down there.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And one thing that we do talk about when we're thinking about road diets, it's not even necessarily, like, road diets don't only work when there is very little traffic. They also work when there is more traffic. And part of what's great about a well-engineered road diet is that it will make even driving safer. And when I'm driving on 291, I sometimes feel like it's just this big open road and people are speeding around me. Sometimes there are like people on bicycles in the middle of the road, and it's kind of scary. And a well-done road diet will help even drivers to navigate the space better. So, we're thinking about how we prioritize cyclists and pedestrians, but the person who is in an automobile, like car drivers, are not part of the picture. Well, because obviously what Daniel said, this is about economic development, and the industries that are down there, the people who are working there definitely matter too to this. So I appreciate you saying that.
And I do, someone born and raised in Chester, drives fast on 291 and ride my bike on 291, and sometimes the cars will come by you and shake you. But it would be nice to, there is a big disconnect from that riverside of 291 with the rest of the city. And I know we have spoken about it before with the Riverfront Alliance piece, a couple of meetings that I did attend. So just, food for thought.
Thank you.
No, that's great.
James Bergman, I think you had a question.
You're muted, James.
Thanks. Sorry about that. The fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. I was just curious what kinds of outreach efforts have been done for the local community in these areas, and what kind of buy-in is there among local residents in these areas? Clearly, they're looking for some kind of traffic calming, but or some of them are. But yeah, has there been general acceptance, enthusiasm, hostility? What's your general sense of that?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Daniel.
I mean, I would definitely ask, those, I feel like there's not that many folks living in Chester on this call, but feel free to speak up, James, like, especially working on the corridor, knowing the corridor too, because y'all would know a lot better than I would, being in Philly. I do know that there's been a lot of engagement around the plans that have been done. So like the waterfront master plan, I know there's a number of meetings, but yeah, I would love to hear from Chester folks. If you're,
Well, I guess I'll throw my 2 cents in again.
No, please. I mean,
as I said, there is a big disconnect from that riverside 291. And we frequent down there often, and I know the area where the houses are, where they have it marked off in the street, drive slow, kids at play. And it's more industrial on that riverside. However, folks, years ago when they first did the expansion to 291, the Chester Boys and Girls Club was on the other side, the riverside of 291, the old Chester Boys and Girls Club. And we tried to add a median in the middle of the street to make it safer for the kids to pass. I mean, and I'm guilty. I'll do 60 miles an hour on 291. Yeah, unfortunately. But there is a serious disconnect. I know residents would certainly love to see. I mean, maybe that plan will slow the traffic down on that corridor, but it's something that I know the residents would love to see. something that can slow the traffic down in particular. So they can utilize both sides of 291, particularly the riverside. You go down there, it's a beautiful place to visit, to walk on a trail down there, but you have some of your seniors just don't venture over there just because crossing 291 is so, hectic.
Yeah.
And also, as far as planning for these spaces have gone, James, I think you're asking about the community engagement activities that have happened. So James Harper, I don't know if you've this is going to be an interesting answer, because if there's somebody from Chester on the call, you might be like, I have no idea about this. But in the planning efforts that we have done, for me, starting with the Chester Comprehensive Parks and Trails Plan that was adopted in 2018, that was a 2-year-long community engagement process where we had a stakeholder group that incorporated community leaders, including folks working with the city, the leader of the Boys and Girls Club, the leader of youth basketball and football teams, law enforcement, religious communities, who came to bi-monthly stakeholder meetings. We also hosted community engagement meetings that overall attracted about 300 people. One of the best ones was at the Boys and Girls Club, and all of the kids came, and it was really cool to see the kids putting stickers on where they wanted to see in their parks. And then focus groups also around that plan, key person interviews, and there was a fairly large planning team that really took the community engagement seriously. We also showed up at some pre-planned community events. There was a peace rally at Memorial Park. There's the River Fest down on the Riverwalk that we attended, trying to engage folks where they were already going to be, as opposed to having them come specifically to a meeting. And so Lisa Gaffney and Spencer and others who might be on the call have been working on, or had worked on, the Riverfront Alliance Plan, and that also had stakeholders, focus groups that some of our nonprofits were involved in, and a lot of community engagement as well. Moving forward with the plans that we spoke about today for Highland and Norris, the community engagement components, even though it's engineering, which is a little bit less wanting to know what people are wanting and just kind of putting designs on paper, that doesn't mean that the community doesn't need to be involved. They definitely do, and there needs to be accountability around what we're planning for. So community engagement is built into all of those funding proposals as well.
Okay. Great. Well, I apologize. I didn't realize there were so many meetings around. I'll certainly be in touch with Miss Lisa Gaffney. We have a great working relationship. So I'm pretty sure
there's any meetings happening right now, because the comprehensive plan was 2 years ago, years ago now, and then the new projects are still getting their funding together. So right now there's nothing to be involved, but there's about to be.
Okay.
We've also put together a West 2nd Street task force as part of the waterfront plan. So we are convening residents and businesses to talk about the trail, the traffic improvements on 291, and some of the other programming along the waterfront. So we are doing ongoing meetings with residents and local businesses, just as an aside.
I had a question. I saw that through the area that you're discussing, it was the consolidated rail line, and I don't know whether I've walked along in Bristol where there's essentially a bike path next to a rail line. Is there wide enough right of way there for pedestrian and biking access, rather than trying to modify 291 at this time? Additionally, in the Talon Stadium during the games, is there a jumbotron in that stadium that can advertise traffic recommendations and the advertising of the Gateway Trail through that area?
There's definitely a jumbotron. That last question. Yeah, they advertise all sorts of things. Yeah.
One point of order, if I can, is the Subaru Stadium now.
Right, Subaru Park.
All right.
Formerly Talon Energy, formerly PPL, formerly, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a great idea. We've talked briefly with a representative from the union about, partnerships. I know that they partner with certain groups in the community sometimes and for certain things, but
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
PSA issue, and
yeah,
you would
but
think
it's
they'd be on.
something to definitely keep in mind. And as far as the rail too, I'm sure others in the group, maybe like Steve, I see, could speak to. But from what I've seen when I picked up the project, the rail pieces that are available are either difficult to acquire, in use, or problematic for other reasons of narrow constraints, like along Front Street. I think that corridor is, it's already, people are kind of parking on the sidewalks and you're on this like cramped road, and it's a little bit disconnected from any activity, so people might not totally feel safe too back there.
Yeah, the famous Philadelphia parking lots
Carries over.
on sidewalks.
Yeah, Steve, did you want
Yeah,
to?
I'm Steve Beckley. I work for the Delaware County Planning Department in Trails and Open Space, and I can speak to that county study where we looked at the different alignments that had been proposed and recommended the optimal alignment. And I believe in that study we looked at the Front Street, using part of Front Street, and that was adjacent to a railway or rails, and from what I understand, whether it's Conrail or another organization, they don't easily give up their right of way. So if you were to approach them, you probably wouldn't be successful. But you use Front Street as a redesigned street or share the road. I think that was the second or third choice, and abandoned in favor of either using the road diet or that other piecemeal option that Daniel presented.
Okay.
There was a study that we did. Andy Strauss was the consultant who worked on a study a couple of years ago, many years ago now, looking at the rail line. And in addition to, as Steve mentioned, it being a right-of-way issue, that would have been difficult to acquire the right-of-way. It also, the improvements to the bridges in particular, I think would have been so expensive that it didn't make sense to pursue. It would have taken 30 years to get
So
it.
it is an active rail line.
Yes.
Okay. I'm from Allentown, Pennsylvania. A lot of the problems you're having are not my problems, because we have rail trails that were long abandoned rail lines, and they're rail lines on paper only, and so that was a matter of just long negotiation and courtesy to get them converted to township trails. But I look forward to getting from these outer fringes down to the circuit trails. Last time I was in Eddystone was about 2 years ago. Eddystone and Hines doing geocaching in that area, and was the Swedish park down there that was really fascinating. So.
Yeah, there's a lot to do in the area. And I mean, it's part of the reason that we are really hoping to build out these trails, because it will connect to so many exciting things to see.
Yes.
Todd. Hey, what's up? You need a haircut, man. Hey,
I think John answered the question about the Pirate Festival. I didn't know there was one, but that sounds amazing.
I'm gonna tell you, well, if I could speak in, it's something that we're certainly looking forward to. One of my colleagues, he was on earlier, I believe he got off. Every year we hold a prostate ride on 291, and we're always looking for, we have some first-time riders that come out, and we have some, serious aggressive riders that come out, and we're always looking to expand the trail. And of course, we start at Subaru Stadium, Subaru Park, and ride up towards the airport area and back down towards Delaware just to get the mileage in. But it's something that we're certainly interested in and excited to see the trail being developed.
That's great to hear. I didn't know about that ride. That's awesome.
Yeah, we do it the Saturday before Father's Day. It's a prostate ride.
Oh, cool. Let's look it up.
I believe now we have
a question.
Up to about 30 miles now.
Awesome.
What's the question?
Can I ask you a question? This is Ira. Speaking about rail lines, I thought that there were some unused rail lines between the 291 and the river that were maybe north of Norris Street. they were talking about being able to use for the East Coast Greenway. Does anybody know anything about that? Steve, maybe?
I think there are some portions of some spur lines that aren't used, and I think there's a crossing, might be of, what's that? Which creek is that? Chester Creek, maybe?
Ridley
Maybe.
Creek comes in too.
Ridley
Really
Creek.
quick, yeah.
Ridley Creek, yeah. So I mean, some are still in consideration, but I think sort of the overall idea of a rail to trail for the entire corridor is what we were talking about. But yeah, portions, I mean, it's it's more of, if the rail companies would be game to talk. But yeah, Steve, do you know about those specific portions that are a little bit north of Norris? Oh, you're muted.
I don't have any specific knowledge that I can, I'd have to examine the study again to know where he's talking about in particular. But yeah, what you said was true, where a lot of those were ruled out because the companies are so possessive of their rights of way.
I think I think Ridley Creek.
Even
crossing.
when it is an abandoned rail line, as Brian was saying a second ago, it's wild how difficult it is to negotiate with the rail company, even when the tracks have been pulled up and there's no way a train's going on it again.
I think it just goes hand in hand with how there's still so much industry down there, and it's waterfront based industry, and they have to get their goods to and from the waterfront.
We have folks on from other parts of the county, and Steve is a great resource for any of those trails too, in case folks have any burning questions.
We have a lot of trails either in the circuit or not in the circuit that are in the county's primary trail network from our plan. Some of them haven't yet been studied for feasibility study, but we do have in our plan as a concept. And I think some of the segments that would connect those trails to the East Coast Greenway that are maybe in the city and the other municipalities that are more urban, it has to be figured out yet and studied where those trails would be too. Like the Chester Creek Trail, how to get it from being a creekside trail and connect it to the East Coast Greenway, that hasn't been determined yet. Or there's a Blue Route Bikeway or a Blue Route Parallel Trail, or Crum Creek too, that's kind of parallel to Crum Creek as well. How to get that from the Leaper Smedley Trail in Nether Providence and extend it down into Ridley Township and Eddystone or Chester. We kind of go alongside where Sun Village Park is. So
love to know if anyone lives or works in the corridor, or even if they visited this corridor, what your experience has been. Have you been on bike? Have you been there walking by transit, or is it mostly driving?
My experience in that area was walking.
Okay. Nice.
We moved from we started at that Swedish park, which I had. That was one of those things that didn't get into my history books. First settlements of Pennsylvania, but then we moved from there over to the Hines, and that was walking. It's just going from one spot to another via automobile. But my being in that tidal area, part of the streets were nearly at water level when we were there. The rain gutters or the storm drain inlets were capped off by water at that time. So it's a very interesting area to be in, and a lot of the industrial areas that I was seeing between 291 and the riverfront were mostly, it was a real, my feeling was a real odd mix between kind of slide zone residential and small garages and small warehouses, but no heavy industry, no so-called light light industry where, you're going to read about them on the, in the business news in the next months or years. It was a real mix of usage. And then once we moved over to Hines, that was kind of an interesting environment too, because though it was dedicated to a natural preserve, being most of those waterways being tidal, were clogged with dead vegetation and floating plastics.
Yeah.
So kind of a disappointment there. I'm sure it was lovely. We were there, I think it was probably December 2 years ago. And so the vegetation had died back. Interesting birding to be done that day, but
oh yeah,
that was it.
Well, I definitely recommend getting back there different times of year, taking a look. It's recovering now from the hurricane earlier in the year, but it's gorgeous as ever. So great amenity there.
All right.
We are 6 minutes over. I don't know, John, do you want to say anything?
So I just want to thank everyone for attending tonight's meeting. And of course, Daniel and Lizzie once again gave a thorough, very well thought out story map presentation. And we have links to not only the presentation, but also to how to get involved in the chat. Like I said, our next meeting will be in January. What was the date again, Patrick? I didn't have it in front of me.
26th.
The 26th for Camden County. Am I right about that? I think I am. So I'm gonna go inside now. It's getting a little cold out here. Thank you all. And if you have to shovel or just scrape ice or whatever's happening out there, go do it. And good night. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks all.
Everyone.
Good night.